Well, welcome once again to ARTbreak, everyone. Just a note about next week's ARTbreak program. It will be virtual only due to complications with our speaker who previously was free on Tuesday, now is not, but she will be here virtually. And the speaker is Megan Moss, who will be talking about the gendering of color. So again, next week will be a virtual program only. Well, hopefully by this point, we haven't already had a chance to look at the really remarkable exhibit going on now called Unmasking Masculinity. And one of the things that I think really makes it special, it does so well, it breaks through the typical stereotypical conception of what masculinity is. And by presenting work that shows a number of different artists from different perspectives and different communities sort of addressing the same theme. And as a result, I think we come away with maybe a more complex view of masculinity, but one that is also more nuanced and insightful as well. So this idea about looking at gender and various other social issues in a more complex way, or looking at it in a way that the stereotypes with our program today to address the construction of gender. And to help us understand this, we're very fortunate to have with us Tracy Hall. Tracy is the Executive Director of Outfront Kalamazoo. And this is a relatively new name for an organization that really has existed for more than 30 years, that started out as the Kalamazoo Gay and Lesbian Resource Center. Since then, it's really grown dramatically, providing services for the LGBTQ community, and also educational programs and community events that increase the understanding and appreciation of its members. I should say that Tracy has been involved with this organization for the past 13 years. She served as a board member and was also its first director of programs. So please welcome Tracy Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? I am Tracy Hall. I'm the Executive Director of Outfront Kalamazoo. One of the things that I've done most of my adult life, though, in addition to spending a lot of time and energy and tears like today at Outfront, is I was a college educator. I taught classes in gender and women's studies from 2005 until 2020, and then political science and sociology courses at KVCC from 2003 to 2020. So for 17 years, it's what I did. I absolutely love it. So it feels like I'm back in the classroom again. And the teacher in me is going to try to have this as interactive as possible. And I know some of you just want to sit back, and I respect that as well. I brought our program manager, my friend Dell, is here as well. And Dell's going to hand out a half sheet of paper. If you don't mind, we'll get to the right here. Okay, I'm still learning to click. There we go. Initially, I was thinking groups, but due to time, I just want us to spend maybe a couple of minutes. Each one of you, one of you will get a group 1 sheet, one of you will get a group 2 sheet, and then just write down the first couple of things that you can think of. And thinking about this idea of gender, intersectionality, the social construction of gender, it's all together, and I'll define those terms here in a few minutes. But it's a perfect kind of discussion when we think about the art that is on display here right now in Unmasking Masculinity. And what does that mean? Well, it does tie into this idea of intersectionality and social construction. And as soon as we get the half sheets of paper out, just take a minute or two. And if you have the group 1 sheet, list differences between women and men. And in group 2, list similarities between women and men as well. And so if you don't mind, we'll spend just a couple minutes on that. I get a little antsy up here, so that couple minutes might turn into 10 seconds, because I'll be like, okay, where are we at now? But as you all are thinking, I just want to share that I'm excited to be here and have this conversation because it's been a minute since I've really been able to talk about gender and what it means to do gender. Thanks, Dal. How about another 30 seconds or so? Okay. Oh, we're setting the lighting. I love it. What kind of differences did you come up with between women and men? Anybody would like to share? Yeah.
But for women, smaller, do you want to hear them?
Yeah, I would love to.
Women smaller, men larger, women gentler, men harsher, and women more group oriented, and men more team minded.
Okay, very good. Independent. Okay. So women are more dependent. Okay, and men are more. Women are smaller. Men are a little larger. Yeah, please.
Example.
Somebody already has an A. I love. Wait.
Physical strength, I have differences, right?
Yep.
I think there often is a difference in emotional intelligence. I mean, for whatever we call it, biological stuff.
That's okay. Yeah.
I'm not saying always, but
No. Venus, old adage. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to add something different that we haven't heard? Because we could do this all day. What about the group 2 sheet? Yeah.
for similarities can laugh and cry. Both can make decisions. Both can fall in love. Both can get angry, and so on. And then I've got both can find God, but that and you want me to tell you I think all of the similarities, except for finding God, is biological, and to find God is kind of a religious background.
Okay. Okay, thank you. You know that similarities are biological. Okay.
I think we're still except for the biological, for the sexual and reproductive organs, and even then, they can be interchangeable psychologically or socially.
Somebody's stepping up to be the class president. Yeah, very good. No, I get it. Okay. No. Yeah, both men and women. Okay. And I think I saw a hand over here. Yeah.
Capable of love and work, experience pain emotionally and physically, have a wide range of emotions, and needs rest.
Oh, yes. I'm in touch with that needs rest. Hold on to those. And let's go to the next slide. And then on your sheet of paper, just jot down a brief definition in your own terms, your own words, sex, sexuality, and gender. And I promise we'll get back to this exercise as we move along. How would you define sex, sexuality? Am I ruffling too many papers? Okay. Are we ready? Okay. Anybody want to share their definitions? Well, first of all, did anybody use the same definition for all three? Did anyone use the same definition for two of the three? Oh, sure, please.
Well, I guess probably we're all three. For sex, I put
Okay. So pervasive, right? This is what we do. Terms, but especially sex and gender. Does anybody have a different, any difference between gender and sex? Yeah.
So I've got sex is the biological way you were born, or it's a term for sexual activity.
Okay.
And then for gender, I thought it's a social construction of our sexes.
So you're done. You've already seen the class. I love it.
Sexuality, I've got, is a choice of who you have sex with.
Sure. It has multiple meanings, right?
Should I turn around?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I've got, for me, sex is the biological way you were born, or it's a term for sexual activity. So it's the way that's used in different ways. The sexuality, I've said, is a choice of who you have sex with. And for gender, I've said it's a social construction of our sexes. So it's the way we understand our sexes. That term gender is used in different ways. And now I've got told off for saying that.
You didn't. I just wanted you to come up and teach this. Makes me feel a little less anxious in front of y'all. Anyone else want to add anything before? Yes.
I agree with sex and sexuality, but for me, for gender, I put physical body parts.
Okay. Okay. All right. Physical body parts. Okay. Yes. Mr. Cowles.
I think sex is biological, sexuality is behavioral, and gender is more identity.
Okay. Very nice. All right. So here are some basic definitions, right? Sex is the biological aspect. Male, female, also intersex. Is intersex a new term for anybody here? So how many of you have ever heard, it's a condition where there are many babies born with could be born with one of many intersex conditions. There's a wonderful website, they don't update it anymore, but it's called the Intersex Society for North America. And they have a list of all intersex, or at least most of them, list of intersex conditions that are out there. So if intersex is a new term for you, you may have heard of an outdated and old term of hermaphrodite. That there's a pseudo-hermaphroditic condition that babies can be born with. And to say pseudo is because no human can actually be born with a true hermaphrodite, which is equal parts of what we would typically associate with men and women, or male and female. 1 in 100, some estimate 1 in 100 babies, up to 1 in 1,000 babies are born with an intersex condition. That is something so basic. It could be hormones, or maybe their chromosome is different. There's one condition called 1 in 100 babies born. Sometimes baby just to an adult, you'll see maybe that they'll have breasts that are larger than we would typically see on a male, or maybe they would have maybe what we would associate as putting all babies in one of two boxes. I mean, what's the first question that you ask your friends when you find out where a member of the baby? Do you have a boy or girl? Or do you want a boy or girl? Right? Either or. We don't usually have we don't have the language right now in which we use and say boy, girl, intersex, right? Or we just make assumptions that baby being born is a nice, pretty pink box or a handsome blue box, right? Define that baby's being defined before they're out of the womb. We start defining. That question. What's the first question you ask when you find out one of your friends or family members are having a baby? I asked this, and so you guys really did well, because the response I got was, "Who's the daddy?" And I suppose in 2022, wow. So my goal today is not only do we leave here and thinking beyond the binary, beyond the pink box and the blue box, but we also start thinking about multiple identities that we all possess and hold, right? Start thinking in what I'll define at our next slide as the intersectional perspective, or using an intersectional lens when we talk about gender or race or class or sexuality, a whole host of differences that we all embody. Gender is the social concept that we often attach with sex. It is based on structural relations. It's based on what sex you're identified or given at birth, as if you will. It's what we do. How many of you thought of gender as something you do, like a verb? Is it? How do I do gender? Do I do gender? Do you all do gender? Del, do you do gender? Give me an example of how you do gender.
The way I express myself in my clothing.
The way you express, yep, you do gender by your clothing. It's clothing, makeup, it's how you sit, it's how you talk. I'm holding on to this, like with dear life, but normally, because I don't wanna make too much noise up here, but normally my hands are going all over the place, right? Some would say that's how I do gender. I talk with my hands a lot, and especially I can be pretty expressive about it at times. Now I'm gonna just sit back, right? Do we do gender the same every day? No. What you're all wearing today may not be what you're wearing tomorrow, or Friday night when you go out on the town, or Sunday when we're watching the Lions win, right? I know, I'm full of jokes. But it is something we do, and we all do it differently. But I'll get to that. Let me get to intersectionality. How many of you have ever heard the term intersectionality or intersectional? Okay, good. This is a concept that was originally coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in the early 90s. It describes the way in which systems of inequality or systems of oppression, like racism, classism, sexism, ableism, homophobia or heterosexism, transphobia, how they intersect. We all have intersecting identities. Some of us have systems of multiple oppressions, and some of us have systems of multiple power, if you will, right? Sometimes, well, let me ask, is it possible? I love it when I give the answer before I ask. Is it possible to have identities in which you're both privileged and oppressed? Yeah. I'm kind of one of those walking stereotypes in a way. So I identify as a lesbian. That's one of my identity. And society has historically oppressed the LGBTQ plus community. I'm also white. Society in North America and in most places in the world have privileged whiteness over non-whiteness, right? So I have multiple systems of oppression. I grew up in poverty. That's another one. Right? I know, though, when I use my intersectional lens, and I try to do it all the time, and usually a lot of times when I do trainings, at least since I've been out front, I'll bring along one of our staff members, Imani, because her and I are both members of the community, but we have different experiences, and we have different lenses from which we see and are seen in the community. And so we're really good balance of each other of what both privilege and oppression looks like when doing this work. The only way that people know that I'm a lesbian is by what? Stereotyping my gender expression, right? You could meet somebody who has short hair, maybe doesn't dress the most feminine, maybe she wears makeup once in a while, maybe she doesn't, maybe she wears makeup all the work. She loves sports. I'm describing my mom, who's very much straight. But not the most feminine mom in the world, but also not as non-feminine like me. So she could have been stereotyped. So we have these social cues that we use. Sometimes we're right on, sometimes we're not. And where do we learn these social cues? Society, and I'll get to that in a little bit. It's so pervasive in just about everything we do. But it's so important when we're viewing things with an intersectional lens, because everybody has a different perspective and faces different privileges and oppression when we have these overlapping social identities. So let's take something maybe the term is sort of modern over the last 30 years, the intersectional term, but let's think about what we know about the civil rights and women's rights movement. It's one of my favorite times in history if we're talking about the 1950s and 60s. For women of color, there were no places in the women's movement for leadership. In fact, leadership, white women during that movement were very much concerned with white middle-class women in preserving their rights and what values they held. So if you were a woman of color or if you were a lesbian, they didn't have time to deal with those other issues. Now, if we think about the civil rights movement, women of color had a hard time also moving up in leadership position, simply because of sexism. So on one hand, we have racism in the women's movement. On the next hand, we have sexism. So if you're a woman of color, you face these multiple oppressions for similar but yet different reasons in both of these historical movements that did so many great things, but also it's okay to be critical of those great things as well. Can you think of any other examples when thinking about intersectionality and how individuals might have a shared identity, but yet treated differently because of a different identity they might hold? Yeah. What was that?
Disability. You've not got anything about disability.
Disability, yeah.
People with disabilities are often not given appropriate rights.
Absolutely. And also have disabilities that can be seen and disabilities that are invisible, right? And we don't know that, coming across meeting somebody. That's a really great example. What else? Yeah.
Ageism?
Ageism, yes. Yeah, absolutely. We see that in all sorts of different communities too. And that has consequences in our lives, especially when we think about those who have power to make laws and legislation, and what kind of laws and legislations are passed. Think about things like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, these benefits that people have worked all their life for. And then it comes down to people who are in office deciding whether or not and what amount should individuals get. Should there be care? Yeah. Any other examples? Yeah.
I think so. Who you're in a relationship with, for instance, interracial marriages, or you have people in your family that are, you adopt different color, and also in your role as a person in a family. Also, I don't know if this is true or not, so help me with this. As a parent of someone who is, who might appear different or minority. I don't know if that makes sense.
Someone, I'm trying to bring it back.
Okay, well, I'll think about it some more.
And Mr. Cowboy is giggling over there.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know.
All right, if you think about it, let me know, and we'll come back to this. Okay. Another example that I use, because I talk about the wage gap a lot in my classes, especially my sociology, my gender studies classes, is we often hear 78 cents is the wage gap between what men earn and what women earn. But that doesn't tell the picture. And that's why we need an intersectional lens to paint a clearer and a better picture. So if we were to break that number down, we would see that African-American men and white women make about the same per hour, 78 cents, 77 cents, depending on the state. And then when you break that down by race and gender furthermore, then we find that African-American women or Black women make even less than that, and Latinx women or Latinas make even less than that. And so there are consequences to our actions when we're not seeing the very full picture. When we're using the same number as a blanket statement or a statement that blankets a whole group of individuals, whether they're women or men or people of color or you name it, that's not painting the true picture. That's one of the other reasons I like to talk about or use an intersectional perspective and use an intersectional lens when talking about this important stuff. All right. So going back to the first question, the group questions, the differences and similarities. Is it nature or nurture? right? I've heard this term social construction thrown around. I've also heard some of you, or I think at least one, talk about the biological aspect, right? Maybe we are born this way, and that's why women act this way, and men do this, or women do that. If we're talking about biology, we're using what's either biological determinism or the essentialist perspective. And that's the idea that people and their characteristics or their groups are biologically based. If we're thinking about the cultural aspect, the nurture part, then it's how we are raised. It's the messages we learn from society, especially our major institutions like the family, marriage, military, government, and my favorite, the media. Because the media we can define in all sorts of different terms, but art is one aspect of the media, right? And that's one reason I love this Unmasking Masculinity, because we're going to learn a little bit something different than we probably thought about masculinity before once we view the art. Often we use essentialism or biological determinism as our given truth. That's a man's job. That's a woman's job. That's a woman's role. Remember when I was a little girl, I really wanted to mow the lawn. I still like mowing the lawn, but I don't get the opportunity as much. But when I was little, I really, really wanted to mow the lawn. And my grandma told me I couldn't because girls don't mow the lawn. When I brought my first dog home, my very first puppy that I got as an adult, I named her Senator. Could not wait to bring her home to meet my grandpa and my grandma. My grandpa told me I could not name a female dog Senator. And sure enough, Senator was misgendered her whole life. Whenever we went to the vet, they all assumed she was a he. No. But that's, we have these labels that we put under men's role or women's role. We're getting better, much, much better. And that's because we know more. We know more about how biology and the social construction of gender works. And this is social construction is a theory of knowledge that holds that characteristics typically thought to be immutable, biological, right? Such as gender, race, class, ability, and sexuality are products of human definition and interpretation shaped by cultural and historical context. Who has the power to define in our society? We do. In theory, we should. It's those who have the power, right? Those who we elect to be our leaders, those who, are the leaders of our churches, in our faith, in our family. They define what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, what men do, what women do, what people of color do, what white people do. They define this. And it's so pervasive that we don't even see that we're learning and hearing these messages as we go throughout society. Kind of like senators, I couldn't name senator. This process we go through is a lifelong process called socialization. Our first and foremost agent of socialization is family. And for those of you who were raised like myself in a very nuclear 1950s way of life, there were definitely roles for men and roles for women in society. Again, I will say that this is getting better. I mean, since we've had some passage of important acts like Title VII and Title IX, we see we see women outpacing men in almost every aspect of education. And now, if we really care about gender equality, we need to ask, what can we do to education of men? Because that's important. But we wouldn't be in this spot today if we didn't have something like Title IX that advanced gender equity, all aspects of education, including sports. I think sports is important to note that probably since 1972 or 1973, we've had over a 400% increase in women's participation in sports. And there's a whole host of good and bad that can come out of that, but I think mostly good, unless you're Alliance fan, right? So let's think back to the first exercise from the beginning and think about some of those those, let me find the sheet where I was right now. Some of those things you wrote down, the differences and similarities. Can you see where social construction or socialization may have played a role in some of that? Maybe not the men are smaller or men are bigger, women are smaller, but that's not the case in every aspect, right? Some women are bigger than men, but for the most case, biologically, men do have a bigger brain than women. But what about this idea of women having space to be more emotional? Or not, I'm sorry, that women are more emotional. Is that a biological construct or is it a social construct? Am I more emotional because I'm a woman? No. I'm more emotional because my mom was an emotional being, and that's the way I was socialized. Man, I wish I was a little less emotional sometimes, right? Do men cry less because it's biological, or do we see men crying less because it's biological, or is it social? It's social. We don't give men the space to show a wide range of emotions like we do women. If we do, then this is a very good, nice segue for unmasking masculinity. Then we use things like sissy or weak or you name it, because that person is showing emotion. And that's really a burden that's unfair to men, too. I can't tell you how many times I've heard students tell me that the only time they've seen their dads cry was when their moms died or their father died, or something like that. It was some sort of circumstance. That's the only time that they would see their dad. And that's a burden that I think sometimes I'm too emotional. I wish I didn't have that, but I'd rather have that than to be told that I couldn't show my emotions simply because that's how we have defined that as good and bad in our society. Other institutions that socialize us, and I mentioned this, is media. We can't escape it. Now we have social media. It's everywhere we go. When I first started teaching, I would ask how many of them would have how many had TVs in their household. There was more often than not, there were more TVs in a household than individuals. Now, because we use our tablets and computers and fewer TVs, that question is not as fun as before. But we have media, we have the radio, we have social media, we have art, we have papers, articles, and the way we use language. And I'll get to that in a minute. Any comments or questions so far? Yeah. We have phones. We have them right at our, thank you. Yeah, right here at our fingertips. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I want to show you this. It is on PBS because I want you to think about this. If things were truly biological, wouldn't we be the same? Wouldn't, you and I act the same? Or wouldn't somebody I just met in, but because it's social, we all, oops, go back. Dell? Is colonialism. And so many different parts of the world have examples of multiple genders, or at the very least, third gender. These have many examples, and we still have some here in North America. But when the West came over and colonized, yes, it is, they brought in a very rigid two-gender system. Okay, I'm going to explore the map. So, pen, you can click on one and see that in this particular part of the world, where I am, I'm in South America, we have an example of something beyond the binary. And this is just one example. If I go up here to the United States, And feel free just to, when you get home, if you want to play around with this more, see what other parts of the world have. Because I'll just quickly do it because I realize it's time here. So we have here in the United States, we have many parts, many states that are rich in Shakespeare tradition. Here's that. Go all over here, Thailand. We have another example. I just don't like the description of that one, so we're going to move over to here. Another example in the Philippines. We can even go down to Australia. So all over the world, we see more than just binary, more than just pink and blue. And in many states, especially when we think about North America, in some of those spaces, we see that those individuals are almost godlike. It's such And again, when we were colonized several hundred years ago, what did I do? Oh, there we go. World related to gender system. So we already talked about this, and I kind of let it up. I kind of got ahead of myself just at this time. Who defines us? Those who have power, right? And that's not changing anytime soon until we can change who's in power. Well, it is changing slowly, I should say. I shouldn't be so negative. Okay. So there are two forms of sexism. I want to talk about cultural sexism more so. Structural sexism is that sexism that we see in the ways that society is organized and its institution and how it organizes society and its institutions to subordinate individuals and groups based on gender and sex. So places like education, work, income, politics. I already gave an example of income of the wage gap and how pervasive the wage gap, especially when you break it down by race. Education, gave an example how in many ways the numbers are reversed today than they were 50 years ago. And so now we got to figure out how we can boost the educational attainment of all men. Was that me? Okay, work. We see work defined in three. We have white collar positions, blue collar positions, and pink collar positions. Which of those three positions do we typically see less income being earned? Pink collar positions. What kind of examples are pink collar positions? What's that? Housekeeper. What? Yep. Teaching. Yeah.
Working in a museum.
Working in a museum. Is our pink position. In fact, in all these other fields, we in the blue collar positions, we know something called the glass ceiling. When part the pretend glass ceiling because they can't get raises or promotions as fast as a rate as their white male counterparts. But nursing, and that's called the glass raises and promotions at a earn defines race, gender, ability, who says what is able, what is able. And those things we learn through family, the media, school, including media, including the arts and religion. And these are just a few of the spheres in which we learn about the things that we're talking about today. Family, as I mentioned, is from if you're not raising your hand, have to, but One of the things that we be that protector in case the parents aren't there, and that first space in the birth order. Anybody? Senator, I couldn't watch football on Thanksgiving. Yeah.
The number one most important thing I can do in my life would be to get married, have babies, not have a career.
I love it. Not really. Go ahead.
I would say that I was taught I had to be strong. Like I had to be strong. I had to be the best. I had to be like always achieving.
Like, I love actually women of color a break to breathe in our society. I get a pass. Oh, there's Tracy crying again. That's okay. She's an emotional being. I mean, I don't cry all the time, but I'm making it seem like I cry all the time, just a little bit. But you know what I mean? Our messages were different growing up. And that's why I think it's so important that when we're looking at things, looking through life, we're thinking about similar beings. We are very see different but similar messages. And it's school. How do we learn gender in school? We line up boy girl, right? Or gosh, even today, this is one of the most frustrating things as a college educator or former college educator to hear when people don't want certain topics in our textbooks. Afraid to add a little bit people of color or about the LGBT community. The strong message, the messages that we have all, most of us have been raised by, if I think about a history class, the history classes that I took growing up or that I was forced to take, and I love history, so I don't mean it like forced, but I learned about all these great men and great wars. If I were to learn about a woman or a person of color, it was a sidebar. A woman named Rosa Parks or Susan B. Anthony, right? And today, there's all sorts of pushback for wanting to talk about history, real history. That part of history is fine, but we're all part of history. We all have so many different voices here. Especially here, it's so important. Also, the way that teachers, and I think this is a little bit better, the way that teachers treat boys and girls differently. Again, there's study after study too, that boys and chose or their see. and my colleague, can't help but to think about the way race plays in that. Or if my male colleague, in my first year in that, I stayed quiet and let a lot of my male colleagues speak because I thought, well, have the head for politics? I don't know. And what about symbols? How do symbols? Do we learn from symbols? Yeah, last night I was at a local school board meeting where the controversy was whether or not to have pride flags in the classroom. Indoctrination and trying to indoctrinate my kid in that gender ideology. Uh, made the distinction early as being some of our major religion. Difficult. Have I know how to silence a crowd like nobody. Yeah.
I've often been fascinated with the breaks in power structures, cultural power. I'm also a teacher, and practice, in other words, as practice of
Okay. then we have one more and bring it full circle.
I would like to say something about this. Started. Surprising to me, as a social worker, I should have known it. But, the mother of this child is in her research that if it's consistent, persistent, and insistent, then it's legitimate, and this child has never said, I want to be a girl, and after being told that, they can't wear dresses, and then the child said, I want to be a boy, but, which is really sad that they had to say that. But anyway, then they met someone who used the, they pronoun, and so now this kid is comfortable using the they pronoun. And, but one thing that bugs me, I have to say, they're in a really progressive, public school, but it's like the,
Are showing the PDS map. You know, knowing that this is something that I think is really important. Just the idea that culturally, the binary of gender is really different in different places, and historically, even if we go back to even ancient times, how people dealt with gender and fluidity was very different.